This is the first lesson for electricity, and today we are going to be learning about static charge. The question for this lesson, then, is what is electrical charge and how do materials gain it? The key words are positive, negative, conductor, insulator, proton, and electron. First of all, we need to do a knowledge check to test our knowledge. So make sure that you do the 8 questions. Make sure that you pause the video so that you have enough time to do them before the answers appear. Here are the answers. So for question 1, the unit of work is a joule, as represented by a capital J. For the equation of work, work done equals force times distance. A megajoule is equivalent to 1 million joules. 1.5 kilojoules in joules is 1,500 joules. When you rearrange work done equals force times distance to make force the subject, we get force equals work done divided by distance. The unit of pressure is a Pascal, and we represent that using a capital P and a lowercase a. The unit of mass is kilograms, and we use lowercase kg to represent that. And the equation to calculate weight is weight equals mass times gravitational field strength. Make sure that you mark your answers and make any corrections that you need to make in a different coloured pen. First, we are going to talk about electric charge. The word electricity comes from the Greek electron, meaning amber, and refers to amber's attractive properties. But what is electricity? If we answer this question, we mostly come up with answers that describe what electricity does. For example, it powers lamps and motors. We need to start by examining the nature of matter. We need to look deeper into the nature of the problem to gain an understanding. Matter is made up of particles. The smallest independent particle is an atom, and atoms are made up of protons, neutrons, and electrons. To explain electricity, we only need to know about protons and electrons. There are 2 types of charges, positive and negative. Protons have a positive charge and electrons have a negative charge. We can charge objects because all objects have positive and negative charges. If we take an example then of a polyethylene rod, it has no net charge because there are equal amounts of positive and negative charge. The charges then cancel each other out because they are opposites and we have the same amount of each. We can charge the rod by rubbing it against a cloth. This action pulls electrons from the cloth onto the rod. The rod then has more electrons than protons, so this gives it a net negative charge because electrons have a negative charge and now it has more electrons. The cloth has less electrons, so it has a net positive charge. To produce a negative charge on an object, the object needs to gain electrons. It needs to gain more of that negative charge. To produce a positive charge on an object, it will need to lose electrons. So lessen that negative charge, but protons do not move. Now we will talk about the forces formed from static electricity. So, a charged object creates an electric field. You can't see the electric field, but it surrounds the charged object. If another charged object moves into the field, a force then acts upon it. The force is a non-contact force because the charged objects do not have to touch each other for the force to be exerted. So, if their objects have the same charge, so if they are both positive or both negative, then the objects will repel each other. This means that the objects will try to move away from each other. If the objects have opposite charge, so one is positive and one is negative, then they will attract each other. This means that they will come closer to each other and possibly then touch each other. It just depends, okay? But they'll be attracted to each other, so they'll want to go closer. Whereas like charges, if they're both positive or both negative, the objects want to keep away from each other, so they'll try to move away. In your booklets, there is a link to a video that you can watch to help understand the idea of attraction and repulsion. This is where charged objects either attract or repulse, depending on then the change in charge. You can also have a look on YouTube for videos showing Van de Graaff generators. This is a machine that shows static electricity by being negatively charged, and this can then form sparks. As you can see in the picture, there is a spark that's formed because of the static electricity. When some materials gain charge, they lose it almost immediately. This is because the electrons flow through them immediately. So as soon as they come in, they also then come out. Conductors are what we call materials that let the electrons flow very quickly through them. Metals are examples of good conductors. There are also non-metals that conduct, for example carbon. Insulators then are materials that do not let electrons flow through them very easily. Electrons can be transferred to them by rubbing. Remember that we created an electric charge on the rod by rubbing it with a cloth. We can rub insulators, and that then gives the insulator a charge. This charge is called static electricity, and it doesn't move. So because the electrons don't flow, they stay in place. All of static electricity is explained by the movement of electrons. So if the electrons flow quickly through, a conductor can't get charge because any electrons that it gains will immediately leave. Whereas insulators can be charged because the electrons transferred to them stay in place, and that then gives them a negative charge. So, make sure that you do a knowledge check to see if you understand the concepts that we have spoken about in this lesson. Make sure that you pause the video to give yourself enough time to answer the questions. Here are the answers to the questions. So, for the first question, the particles in the atom which carry charge are protons and electrons. The two types of charge then are positive and negative. So protons have a positive charge and electrons have a negative charge. Like charges attract. Like charges repel, whereas unlike charges attract. A static charge can be created on an object by rubbing another object against it. The type of material that cannot be charged are conductors, because they immediately lose any electrons that they gain. A material becomes positively charged by losing electrons, whereas a material becomes negatively charged by gaining electrons. Make sure that you mark your answers, make any corrections that you need to with a different coloured pen. Let's recap then some key definitions. So, positive, if an atom is positive, it has lost one or more electrons, so it has an overall positive charge because it's lost an electron or more electrons, and electrons are negatively charged. So if they lose the negative charge, they then overall become positive. Negative charges are then if an atom has gained one or more electrons, it then has more negative charge than positive charge, so overall it has a negative charge. Conductors are materials that allow electrons to flow freely through them, and that then means that they can't become charged because anything that they gain just then moves freely. Whereas an insulator is a material that doesn't allow electrons to move, which then means if they gain electrons, they stay there and the insulator gains a charge, a negative charge. A proton is a subatomic particle that is positively charged, whereas an electron is a negatively charged subatomic particle. So atoms are made up of protons, electrons and neutrons. When it comes to electricity, we only really need to know about protons and electrons. Electrons more specifically, because they are what moves around when we create static electricity. There is a video then in your booklet, a link to the video, showing some experiments that you can try at home that show static electricity. So if you have some extra time, make sure that you have a try of these experiments. That is the end of the lesson. Thank you for watching.